And welcome into In Depth with Fox Carolina Sports, where we go in depth with local coaches and athletes to find how they've gotten to the pinnacle and walk their path with them. And we're joined by the Furman Paladins star head coach, Bob Richey. Coach, thanks so much for joining us. Thought it was an opportune time to get you on here as basketball season starts to wind down. And what a crazy season it's been. Let's start with how things wrapped up for you guys earlier than many thought, earlier than you guys would have liked. For those that didn't follow the SoCon tournament, super close. Furman goes in as the 3 seed, as talented a team as there is in there. Take VMI to overtime, and one of the stars on Furman, Noah Gurley, hits a shot that was intended to be a game-tying 3, but it was a 2-pointer, and Furman ends up losing by 1, an absolute heartbreaker. Such grit on that basketball team, Coach, and that is a credit to you. But I'm curious what you say to that locker room as, the expectations were higher and just a gut-wrenching loss there.
Yeah, I mean, it's sport, right? I mean, you just sometimes, the ball bounces your way and sometimes it doesn't. And you got to be able to evaluate the things that you can control in those situations and the things that you can't. And, overall, it was a crazy year. I think there was definitely more good than bad with our season, but we didn't get that ultimate goal of what we wanted. But, it's the last game of the regular season. We were playing for an outright and, lost on the buzzer there in Spartanburg. And then, lost in a 1-point overtime game in the quarterfinals of the SoCon tournament. And, that was a little bit, you look back on the season, we were 16-9, had a good year overall. But those close losses, and also for whatever reason, this team gave up more second half leads than what we're accustomed to. And we got to be able to look at that and evaluate it. You look at some of the double digit second half leads, one being in that VMI game this past Saturday, we're up 15. One being at Alabama, up 14 in the second half. How good will we feel had we been able to pull that out at this point? We lose 3 games in the league by 1 point. We've got, we're close of where we want to be, and we've been able to sustain winning around here for a while. I guess this was the 6th winning season in a row for Furman. I don't know when the last time that was done. But for us to be able to get that last hump that we all want to see, of Greenville being involved in the picture of being in the NCAA tournament, we've got to finish these games better. And that's the biggest takeaway from the season, of just good year, but man, could it have been a special year? Not anything we had to necessarily do crazy, but if we hold on to 4 second half double digit leads, how much better is a year? And that's going to definitely motivate us going into this season. We don't lose a lot. We got what we feel like is our best recruiting class coming in on paper. Signed 4 really, really good high school kids. And, we'll just lose Clay Mounts off this team. So, it's about progress, and we don't want to be discouraged, with what happened in the last week. Disappointed for sure, but encouraged about getting into a real offseason. What we did get to miss this last year, which for us being a developmental program, definitely wasn't ideal. But to get into a real offseason and continue to develop, bring in some new blood, and get excited to get this thing back up and going again.
That was the next thing I was going to ask you is Clay Mounts. Obviously he's as talented a player as there is in the SoCon, but there's no possibility of a 6th year for him. He is gone next year.
So he could come back. That option would be available. I just think, Clay's got a chance to go be a pro and, and find a place to go play. And I think after a guy's giving you 5 years, I just think it's hard to ask for 6. And, I really, if he wanted to, yes, we'd make it happen. But I think, you got to be able to evaluate what's your pro opportunity. And he's a 2-time all-conference player. And, life progresses. And I think if he's got some pro potential, then, I think he's excited about seeing what that next chapter is like. And, he gave us a great 5 years, and, he did a lot of good things here. And, we're going to support him in that path. But excited to get Alex back. He obviously played his first year as a freshman. He didn't redshirt like Clay did. So, he's going to be able to get that 5th year. And, Alex really came on this last month of the season. Just was playing at a really high level, and, excited to see that leadership and that personality continue to flourish. And, what I think can be an all-conference type year for him next year. I really do. I think he can go out there and be an all-conference point guard, and excited to see that take place.
Talking about Alex Hunter, one of the two seniors on this past Paladins team. And just before we move on, certainly, when you look at the talent that you have coming back, I mean, those are the only two seniors. There's a bunch of really good sophomores, juniors on this team coming back. And when they have tasted the success that you guys have over the last few years, really your entire tenure as the head coach at Furman, and then you lose in a heartbreaker like they did, I got to imagine that the hunger is going to be there going into this offseason, that they know they can play with anybody. They know they should be playing on Monday night in Nashville. Just the mentality of this team going to the offseason, I'd imagine, would be pretty tenacious.
Yeah, it's been good even so far. I've had a couple come to my house, and I had breakfast with one of them yesterday. He had about 2 pages of notes, and he broke down for me. And I think they're going to be fueled by this. And I think that's the biggest thing is, you don't want to be discouraged. You don't want to be afraid of dealing with harsh realities that we didn't get the job done, but that doesn't discredit the progress that we've made and how we can continue to push forward. Can we be motivated and excited, regardless of the noise and some of the negativity? Can we be motivated to just continue to build, and can continue to grow? And, of course, we all want to win all of them, but that's not really a reality. But can we push the overall program forward? Can we continue to get better as players? Can we continue to get, some of the infrastructure around here that needs to improve better? Facilities and different things that we haven't been able to address in a while. Can we continue to recruit at a high level, right? Can we continue to go out there and get the best players possible that fit Furman University, that fit our program and our culture? We just got to keep pushing. And, if we continue to push in the right direction, it's going to eventually take place. We're going to go up there and we're going to win the tournament. We're going to get in the NCAA tournament. And then once you get to that point, then you gotta continue to try, there's more challenges that come with that. And so there's still some, mental and psychological hurdles around here of us starting, some people starting to buy into the, hey, Asheville, are they going to be able to get it done up there? And we hear all that and we understand all that. And, there's been a lot of tough years around here, and we're aware of that as well. But we've got to make sure we protect our mentality, that we're motivated to grow and to push and not to concede to that and to concede to negative thinking, that we got to continue to find ways to get better. And that's what excites me, and the off season excites me. And, continuing again, this will be the first 4-man class we've had in a little while, which brings some new blood in here, some guys that have been winning, some guys that have really, really good players. So I think there's a lot of excitement, and but we got to be willing to do the work.
Obviously, and look, as far as looking at the SoCon next year, you guys are as good a bet to win that league as any that's out there. A ton of talent coming back. Certainly the bar is set high in terms of expectations for Furman basketball heading into the 21-22 season. But before we move on from this year, I'm curious, obviously this pandemic has affected all of us in different ways, whatever walk of life, whatever profession you're in. I'm curious if you can give us a little behind the scenes look at the headaches that it's caused from you as a basketball coach. You guys have a couple stoppages throughout this season. I'm not sure there was a team of college basketball that wasn't affected by it one way or the other. But I mean, yeah, I remember the one game that was either postponed or canceled due to a false positive. And that's got to be frustrating as all get out. Just from scheduling to who you have available to play each day, when you're allowed to practice. Can you just, give us a little perspective on what this has been like now that, hopefully we're on the other side of this thing and the 2021 season in the rearview mirror. When you think back to this, what's going to stand out to you?
Yeah, I mean, we'd probably have to have a couple episodes to cover it all. But, I tell you this, it stretched me as a coach. It stretched me as a person and as a leader. I think that, it made us all get better. It really being able to manage a lot of different things at once, to be able to deal with different protocols. I think the one thing I noticed in the year is, people were a little bit more on edge. I think that going through everything that we've been through as a country and a society in the last year, I think managing some of that, you had to do it. You had to lead in a different way than maybe we have the first 3 years, of being the coach here. There were just different ways that you had to go about certain things. And but you know what? I told our team this Saturday night in the locker room, in the middle of the pain. I mean, how proud I am of them. You did mention the false positive, but our kids carried out the protocol from July to now as good as we could have possibly asked them to. We didn't have a single positive case. Okay. And, the public might think, hey, that's not a big deal. If they knew what I asked them to do and what they had to do in order for that to happen, we lost 5 games this year. And one was because of the false positives here. The others were because of other programs. And so you still have to deal with those disruptions when a team calls, that morning and says, hey, we can't play, or this game got canceled. And it kind of got lost in the shuffle, Aaron. I mean, think about this. We lose the fifth place team at home, okay, the 6th place team at home, and the 10th place team on the road. If we get to play those 3 games and let's say you have a chance to win all 3 of them, if you do, well, we're tied for league champions, right? So with that was one of those situations you got to deal with the mental of that, coach, man. I mean, why can't we play these games as a league? And, like there's so many things that you had to navigate. There's so many expectations and, hey, we lost this game, or, we thought we were playing tonight. Instead, we have to practice. And so, there's stuff that comes with that. We were playing really well early in January. And then we basically had a huge stopgap, where we were, we had like 2 games in 2.5 weeks there. And so, there's just all that goes into it that you learn. We all hear the cliche as coaches, control what you control. You had to live that this year. Like you had to really be able to figure out, okay, what's important here? What can we control? What can't we? And the more you got hung up on the things you couldn't control, the less energy and thought and really decision-making power that you had to be able to put in the things that you do control. And so, you're talking about different ways we travel, different ways we eat, having to stay places and, at the arenas and eat after the games and, this stuff in hotels and meetings. And, it was just all different. And, but at the end of the day, we were never going to use it as an excuse, and that was one of the things that we talked about all year, is that everybody has to deal with this. There's going to be winners and losers through this. We got to make sure that we find ways that this can stretch us. And, Noah Gurley, man, I mean, you talk about his growth this year. I mean, look what he was doing the last month of the season, learning how to deal with being, a go-to guy and the double teams and the attention that he was getting. Obvious growth, right? You talk about Mike Bothwell that went from being 6-man last year to being an all-conference guy this year, and learning how to carry that load and learning how to lead. I mean, he grew, right? You talk about the last month that Alex Hunter had that we referenced. I mean, obvious growth there. And so, I'm proud of these guys regardless. We always want expectation. I always tell people all the time that beats the heck out of the alternative, right? But with that expectation, I also don't want these guys to discount their growth, and just how they grew as people, the adversity they had to handle, the conditions that they had to work through, their willingness to comply with the protocol. It was difficult. And, we're all going to look back on this and we're going to see that we had some evident growth as a program through this, and that could potentially, push us forward in the future.
I think it's easy to forget that, these are college kids, right? And that is a tough thing to do, to ask them to completely change their vision of what being a D1 athlete at a program like Furman is like, and your social life that goes with it. That's something, that gets lost in this a lot because we just look at X's and O's and wins and losses. When you have a successful program that you do, with the amount of, spread out talent and the amount of guys that contribute for you, your bench has always been pretty deep. And all these guys have a high stake in getting this program to that next level. How much easier, well, I don't want to say easier, but how much does it take off your shoulders knowing that they're going to hold themselves accountable too? Because as you mentioned, there are so many things that you can't control. You have to be dialed in with what you can.
Yeah, and that's a credit to, all programs. I believe usually, your results are a byproduct of the people that you bring in and, the processes you have in place. And, our culture has really helped us in a lot of situations. And, just to have a culture of connection, a culture of hard work, a culture of guys being willing to work while they wait, a culture of understanding that we've got to make sure that we operate as one. And this is about the program. This is not about the individual. And so I think years of having that and then starting to understand this is who we are, they're willing to own another night. Hey, we got to be better. And we're eager to get into the spring, coach, and figure out how we've got to be better. There's not a lot of excuse making, it's just, we've got to figure out, we're eager, to go and figure out how we've got to continue to take the steps forward. And, the each step you take, Aaron, as we all know, the harder it is, it's easy when you've got to go energize a team that won, 7 ball games, right? Like you go in there and, you get some good schemes and you start to get your people in there and you get new energy and, all of a sudden this thing starts to rise. But once you've established yourself as, hey, we're going to win 20 games a year and we're going to compete at the top of the league and we want to compete for a championship every year. Well, every step you take is a harder step. And I think that's where, that's the point where we are right now where, it's how much more do you want to commit? Like what are the things that we want to look at in the mirror and say, as a leader myself, like, where do I got to get better? I've only been a head coach 4 years and yeah, we've had some success, but like, there's things that I've got to do better. And I know that, and I've got to have a great off season, and I've got to make sure that I improve. And when my team sees me next year as a leader, that they say, hey, this is the best job he's done. And I think if we can all carry that attitude with humility, let's just go improve, let's block out the noise. Let's continue to understand what our goals are, what we're trying to do. We want to be deliberate in our improvement. We want to have an urgency to that. Then this program is going to be in good shape. And, so the culture is critical here. We've always kind of led the way with that, which I think you can see in our retention, that our guys, for the most part, stay and they want to be a part of this and they want to keep pushing. And so we got a great staff. We got a great group of kids. And, we're looking forward to the days ahead. We're optimistic about it. We think we're just getting started. We feel like the best days of Furman basketball are ahead. And, I think that's the fun of it, to be able to tweak and adjust and grow and to be able to look back on it years later and say, man, look at the journey. And that's always what gets me excited.
For those that don't, cover Furman or coach at Furman, just a quick recap what coach was talking there. Yeah, 4 years in as a head coach, but the success should not be understated. School record 23 wins in your first year running the Paladins basketball program. You follow that up with back-to-back 25-win seasons, big-time wins over programs like Villanova, recent national champion, Loyola Chicago, recent Final Four participant. And you look at all the wins that you've had that are landmarked, and you got that big fancy facility over there with Timmons Arena in your office and all these big lists. When Coach Richey goes into preseason practice next year and you have those team goals listed on there, what is the one that you're going to be pointing out and saying, this is how we take the next step? Is it a conference championship? Is it a regular season title? When you look at 21-22, our season will be a success if, what is that blank?
If we go win in Asheville. I mean, that's the next step. And, that's the one step. That's what we've got to go do. And so, it's, I think how you do that is we've got to finish, we've got to have, this out of our 4 teams. I think we struggled to finish some of the closer games this year than we have in the past. I mean, you mentioned the Villanova win. Well, that was overtime. You mentioned the Loyola win. Here last year, we beat them by a good margin at home, but the first time we beat them, it was a buzzer beater, and you go through the years, we were on the positive side of a lot of close games. And, for whatever reason this year, I mean, just whether you want to call it luck or we didn't have the ability and the grit to finish games, we've got to figure that piece out. So, I think that it's nothing to be alarmed about. This team's shown a great, the program has shown a grit to win. I think that for us, we got to go get Asheville done. That's the bottom line. And we've won a lot of games. I think when we took over the program, historically, the program had won 49% of their games in a 100-year history or whatever it is. And so our kids have done a great job of elevating that and, winning a large amount of games and keeping us contention for a championship. at this point, we got to go do it, and we got to go get this in the NCAA tournament, and we can't be afraid of that. And we can't be afraid of that expectation. I think sometimes you got to grow into that a little bit. I think with the amount of losing that has been around here for a while, before these last 6 years, people can kind of get, a little bit of a negative expectation, right? Like, oh man, here we go again. And I think over time, you got to work through that, and your fan base has to work through that. And we've all got to say, hey, you know what, we can go do this. And we got to get excited about it. I think Greenville's got to get excited about it. And people got to say, you know what, they can go and do it. And I think once we are willing to do the work behind it and, continue to improve to put ourselves in that position, then at some point it's going to get done. And, we're going to have a lot of fun with it.
You mentioned the recruits coming in, and I look at your track record, 6 years as an assistant before you get the head coaching gig in Furman. And you talk about some big-time players. You had a big hand in recruiting the likes of guys like Devin Sibley, Stephen Kroon. I'm assuming you're a big reason that Jordan Lyons, the winningest player in program history. When you look at these guys lined up, they stack up with the all-time greats in Furman basketball history. How have you been able to identify those types of players at the mid-major level and, to your credit, develop them into the players that they then become?
Well, I think I tell people a lot of times, Aaron, at this level, it's more about selection than recruiting. You got to be able to select, and you got to be able to select correct. And, there's a certain skill set that's necessary to be successful as a player. I think there's a certain mental makeup. But then there's to me, I've always been a believer, there's a certain character to it as well that you're looking for. And, I've never recruited somebody that I didn't, it was one of those things early. My first job, I was 23 years old at Charleston Southern, and I was able to go recruit that first season, which really helped me. And, I enjoy connecting with people. I enjoy getting to know people and figuring out, okay, how can they help this program? But I also like evaluating. I like evaluating the puzzle and figuring out, all right, this is what this team needs. And, I'm not afraid to go out there. Some of those guys you mentioned didn't have a lot of offers when we decided to take them. And so you're identifying traits that you think are going to be high potential individuals, right? Like these guys are going to come in. It's not about what they are right now. It's about what will they be after we develop them, and are they going to be willing to invest in what it's going to take to develop? And that's where I've always leaned, is just, making sure that I've always liked skill. I've always liked, guys that have some grit to them and some toughness to them. But at the end of the day, too, like, what's their self-discipline? What are their habits? What's their support system? Are they going to grow when they get here? Are they going to come in here and say, okay, well, what do I get? I don't really want to have to work hard. And if it doesn't work out for me, I'm going to transfer. I think it's all about all those factors that go into the selection of having a great player. And like, even the one now, like Noah Gurley, I was fortunate enough to be the primary recruiter for him when I was an assistant here. And, it took a little persuading. And because he was, he was skinny. He was 175 pounds, and he didn't have a lot of offers at the time. But you know what? Once I got to know his parents, his high school coach came from a winning program, high academic, strong character. Like, you just knew, like, hey, he's going to develop. And so Noah's not the same person, player, physical body, like, he's a totally different person than when he showed up here. And for us, that's the trick. We have to get people that can develop. And, I think that's do they fit Furman? Do they fit the institution? Do they desire the academic rigor that Furman's going to, present? And I think that's, making sure that you don't compromise any of that. Right. And then trusting that maybe they don't have the accolades, but man, when they get here and they develop, everybody's going to be like, well, where'd he come from? Now, as the program's growing, this class that we have coming in, we were able to go head to head with some people. And I think the more you sustain winning, you're going to be able to do that. But what you can't do is lose that chip. You can't lose that desire to grow, right? And that desire to go, prove everybody wrong. And so you've got to make sure that you continue to identify that type as you decide that as a program, okay, we can go get in a few more battles because of how much we've been winning. But we don't want to forsake the core of what got us to this point to begin with.
And certainly, just from being on campus as much as I have, that's one of the best selling points you have, how beautiful that campus over there in Furman is. One of my favorite places to go. I hope to be able to go there a little bit more once this pandemic ends, get back into the flow of things. I'm curious, when you think about your timeline you end up at Furman as an assistant, and then you go through a coaching change. Coach Medved, your predecessor, decides to keep you on. How pivotal of a moment was that in your coaching career? And I'm curious, like, what's going through your head when things are in limbo? Obviously, we know how it worked out, and you end up getting the head coaching gig when Coach Medved goes to Colorado State. But when during that time, and I'm not sure how long the difference was, you end up getting retained. Obviously, you've done enough to prove how valuable you were to the program at that point. But how critical of a point was that during your entire trajectory to where you are now?
Well, that's funny you asked me that, because I was just discussing that a little while ago with one of our assistants, and it was one of those crucible moments in my life, like a crossroads of like, where's this all going? And I tell people all the time, I can see God's hand in my journey, just based on the fact that I only moved one time, and I got my first shot as a head coach in my wife's hometown. And I've had a pretty seamless transitional element to my career. I didn't have to move all over the place. I don't live so far away from family. My wife grew up here. Greenville has been home her whole life, except the 5 years we were in Charleston. And so when that happened, that was a very tough moment, because we had come up here from Charleston Southern. They had just won 22 games when we decided to come, and Jeff had a contract extension, and, hey, let's come in there and let's recruit, let's work hard, and let's get this thing, continue to push it forward. And, we'd felt like at that point we had signed some good players. Stephen Kroon, we had signed under Jeff. Chris Acox is another all-conference player that we had also signed under Jeff. And, I remember, I was sitting in this office across from my desk right now when I found out. And it was like yesterday. I've got a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old at home. My wife, we made the commitment for her to stay home. And I'm sitting there like, man, I don't have a job, like, we just got to let go. And what am I going to do? And, I will say Gary Clark, the AD at the time, was phenomenal with me, and, assured me that, hey, look, really want you to try to keep this together. We got some good young players. See if we can keep them on campus. And if you do, and we can keep this thing together, then, we're going to put in a good word for you for the next guy. And, it's just, when you look back on it, Aaron, it's just incredible to me. And it gives me a lot of faith when I go through hard moments now, because, I didn't know Nico at all. And Nico and I had an unbelievable relationship where we knew each other's strengths, we knew each other's weaknesses, and we worked so well together, and even to this day, we talk all the time, and, we understand each other. And like, I literally had one conversation with a guy years ago in Cincinnati at an AAU event, and we start working together, and it's just like our vision, how we got to get it there. We each had different unique ideas, but like, it was just, it's hard to explain. And I always had faith, even as we were turning it, as we were having to make some culture shifts and do some different things, that like, we were going to get there. And, I did have an opportunity to go to another school. It was for a little bit more money originally. And, but my conviction was at Furman, and I wanted to see it through, and I wanted to see the younger players continue to grow. Let's keep recruiting. Let's get this campus engaged. Let's see if we can get this city engaged. And, I make jokes about this. I think this is okay to say on here, but everybody would ask me this year, like, what's it like, with COVID and, not having a lot of people at games. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's how it used to always be around here. Like, I've had a lot of games where we've had 250 people there, and, and I wanted to see it through. And so, that's what keeps me motivated today. I've seen this program at the lows. I've seen this program at a high, and I've seen the growth through it. And, that fuels me to this day of how people saw the program then, and how there was no hope with the program. Greenville didn't, they didn't even know we played games out here. We wouldn't be doing this interview, like, what I mean? Like, there was just no care. It was full apathy. And, so even as we go through this little, man, can they win Asheville? Like, to me, like that falls on deaf ears to me, right? Because I've seen us come from 340 in RPI to really where we've been basically a consistent top 75, 100 program here these last 3 or 4 years. And we're going to keep pushing, right? And we're going to keep making progress. And, I think that's sometimes, right, some of the valleys can produce the most strength in us individually as people, but also as organizations. And it's when you go through something like that of getting fired and then having to basically, resurrect a program, you get a little, you get a little calloused in some things of like, hey, this isn't going to be as much as what people think because of what we've been through before. And, so I think about it a lot. And, this time of year is always harder for me, unfortunately, as a society and as fans, we celebrate firings, which is a really bad deal. And it's something that I would even challenge listeners today. Like, I know everybody loves their teams and they love their coaches and they want to see everybody win. But these are real people and they're real families and they got real kids. And when you're out there celebrating on Twitter that so-and-so got fired, I spent some of my morning this morning calling somebody that got fired because of my experience, what I went through, when I was 31 years old with 2 kids and a wife. It's hard. And those moments they're you got to walk through them, and it's not always easy. But it's something that at the end of the day, though, I don't think I'm in the position I'm at to be able to be a head coach at 34 and to be able to help a program if I hadn't gone through a lot of those different adversities. And, couple that with what we had to do at Charleston Southern as well. I mean, that was, we had a tough program. We had to build that up to a point where we could compete for championships. And so, the journey in all this, I guess, is what I would say. The journey in all this is to me, those hard moments is what gives you an opportunity to get the strength and the knowledge and the wisdom to get to the pinnacle at some point along the way.
Well, let's talk about that journey a little bit. You are about as local as it gets when it comes to the Palmetto State. For those that don't know Coach Richey's backstory, from Florence, you played high school ball at Florence Christian. You were the 3A Player of the Year. I did not know that. I'm interested in that a little bit. And then, you played college ball at North Greenville. A lot of folks around here know that. But, when you go from, each side of South Carolina and have had success the way you have, strong ties are built at all different corners of this state. I'm curious how much that's benefited you in your time at Furman, knowing that you have contacts all around this state. Nothing's really getting by you in terms of recruiting, and there's always friends around if you need a question here or there, or even a scheduling conflict, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I love the state, and most of my formative years, to be honest with you, Aaron, we're in Columbia. So I've lived in Columbia, I've lived in Florence, I've spent 5 years in Charleston. Now I've spent 10 years of my life in Greenville. And so I guess I've been everywhere except Myrtle Beach, which, we've all been to Myrtle Beach a time or two since we've lived here. So, I love the state. And, I think that I grew up in Columbia at the time when Coach Fogler won the regular SEC championship with BJ Mackey and Melvin Watson and Larry Davis and Ryan Stack. I've got my scrapbook, that I still have when I cut out all the articles and, went to all the games. And, Coach Fogler is why I made the decision to get into this. I thought that my dad was a physician and still is. And, it was one of those things where I was like, I'll just follow Dad in his footsteps. And, as I started to see Coach Fogler, I'd go to camps in the summer, I'd go to games, and, they were building a program there. And I was like, man, what a job he has. He can go be a college coach, and, that's what he does every day, and it was one of those things you just tuck away and you're like, man, if you ever got an opportunity to do that, what a dream that would be. So, a lot of my roots are in the state. I love the state. I think there's good basketball in the state. I think we're seeing that. I think this state has produced a lot of really, really good players over the years. And, especially when we're able to keep a lot of the talent, like we've got, one of our starters is in state, and that was one of the big things, when we got here. I would say more so when Nico got here, is like, hey, why don't y'all recruit the state? And, Andrew Brown, local kid, just had a phenomenal career here. And, now he's a financial advisor in Greenville. He's come back to Greenville. He loves Greenville, loves Furman. Jalen Slauson, starter for us. Larry Weidman was from South Carolina. Jalen Williams was from South Carolina. So, we've invested in this state, and we'll continue to make sure we do that and recruit the state, especially when they fit us, how we play, and, the rigor of the institution from an academic standpoint, and also from a culture fit, if it fits us and stylistically, I mean, that's always a big thing in recruiting. Like for us, it's no secret. We like to shoot a lot of threes. So, we're probably not going to recruit a guy that's not a great shooter from the perimeter. But if it all fits and it makes sense, then, we want to make sure that we focus on this state. So, again, that's been one of the neat things. My family, if anybody's followed our program, my family's kind of all in, and my wife Jessica's been phenomenal in terms of the demands of being a coach's wife in this and being from Greenville. But then my daughter Audrey and my son Mac, they love it. The hardest thing about COVID for them was not being able to travel and be on the bus and being able to do some things they do. But we haven't had to move around a whole lot. I mean, we've literally moved from Charleston to Greenville, and I think that's been a neat part of our journey, that we haven't had to jump up all around, and we've been able to enjoy this great state.
I want to, this is not on my list of questions, but I was curious, you at this point, you're a pretty well-known national name, and you're recruiting a good chunk of the country as well as locally. But when you look at the types of players that the Palmetto State's produce, you can think back to Kevin Garnett or Trevor Booker, and more recently, John Morant and Zion Williamson on the national stage. Nationally, do you think that South Carolina, especially at the high school level, is maybe underappreciated from a national perspective from the type of talent that this state's been able to put out?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I don't have all the numbers, but I would think per capita, I mean, we gotta be up there. I mean, we didn't even talk about, Aaron. That's obviously Aaron, his phenomenal career that he had at Vanderbilt. Now he's with the Celtics, and you talk about what Josiah is doing at Tennessee. I'm sure I'm leaving some guys out, but like we could talk for days. I mean, we didn't mention Chris Middleton and what he's doing, right? His pro career. All these guys, I mean, they're from this state, and a lot of times they sneak out, or they end up going out of state for college, or they stay in state, and Zion goes to Duke, and so sometimes I think people forget that he's from South Carolina, but this state's been phenomenal in terms of producing talent. And, it's something that, you look at, you just go, I mean, I'm sure I've missed 4, 5, 6 names just sitting here trying to recall them. But, this definitely, we don't have a shortage of basketball talent. I know it's got the reputation of being a football state, and we've got great football. I'm not a football coach. I'm a big football fan, but I know obviously, football has been what the state's been known for, but our basketball definitely deserves a little bit more recognition from what we produce.
That's something that doesn't get talked about enough, frankly.
I agree. I totally agree.
Of great talent that comes out of this state. All right, I want to get in some fun questions with you. You're a 3A player of the year in high school. You play at North Greenville, so you've played college basketball. Can you dunk?
I can't dunk right now. Absolutely not.
Could you dunk?
It was a point in my career where I could, I don't know if I could have pulled it off in the game, but if I could throw a lob to myself, or get off of one foot, if I was feeling right, I've definitely enjoyed the thrills of a dunk, but it hadn't been for real points though.
All right, but you were a good basketball player. What is the sport that you wish you were really good at?
You know what? I played a lot of sports growing up. That was still at a time where it wasn't all specialized, and you just kind of played all of them. No sport gave me the thrill that basketball did. Soccer, you just felt like you were running around a lot, at least for me, like baseball, my personality style, there was too much stoppage. Basketball, it was just, there was a certain excitement and thrill that really, to be honest with you, there wasn't much of a second. I think because of how I'm built, I'm a huge college football fan. Absolutely love it. I mean, I don't have many outlets, but that's probably what my wife would tell you relaxes me, is to be able to just sit down and watch some college football. It'd have been fun to be a quarterback. I can't throw well, but with my personality and just kind of how my brain works, if I could have been 6'5" and being able to sling it out there and be able to play a little pigskin. I never did. That's the one sport I really didn't play, because by the time I got old enough in high school, that's when the AAU stuff really started picking up with basketball. And so it was a decision: do you go to spring football practice or you play AAU? And I went with AAU basketball, but that's the one that I probably look back on with the most regret of not trying to play a little bit more football.
What point during the career have you been the most starstruck? Because you've beaten some pretty good coaches now, and you've obviously interacted with a lot of them. Uh, but maybe on the basketball court, maybe you're at a function that, I'm curious the story where you go, oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm talking to this person.
Yeah, that's easy. I think that, there's only one time before a game where I've gotten lightheaded, and that was my first year at Duke. And that's just something I'll never forget. It was just coming out. It was like my fifth game I'd ever coached. And so I'm having to figure this. I'm like, am I really coaching against Coach K tonight? Like, what is going on? Like you're just sitting in your hotel room and you're thinking about it. And like, it's the weird part about life, right? Like if somebody tells you 10 years ago, hey, you're going to be coaching a game versus Coach K, you're like, man, what kind of far-fetched dream is that? But then once it actually happens, you can kind of get a little bit numb to it. You just kind of go business and figure out the game plan. And it's, we got to get our team ready. But when I walked out of that Duke game, first of all, the whole Cameron thing is incredible, and it's not overrated. And it's exactly what it's claimed to be. But they're out there playing that song, and I'm drawing a blank on it now, but you can't hear a thing. I mean, you can't hear a thing. And then Coach K's walking up to me, and he puts his hand on my chest, and he tells me, just he shares some nice words with me, and gave me a little bit of advice. And he knew I'd just gotten started, and it was just kind of a surreal moment. And so I would say that, just because it was so fresh. It was right at the beginning of my coaching career, and that would probably be on the top of the list.
And I think for folks that haven't seen a game at Cameron Indoor, and obviously it's different this year with the pandemic, but I would equate it to playing in like a large Catholic high school gym. It's just there's a mugginess to it. It feels very old fashioned and old time. It's unlike anywhere I've ever covered a game. And you ain't lying. When they get loud, boy, you can't hear a thing.
You can't hear anything. We were up. We got up early, and I think I don't remember how much we were up, but we were up, maybe 5 or 6, and it was like 10 minutes into the game, and and so I walked down to the end of the bench, and I'm down there, and a couple of our walk-ons are down there, and I just look at Brady, and I'm like, how cool is this? And he just looks at me, and his eyes, get real big, and it's those moments you want to treasure that a little bit as much as you can. I think that's probably one of my weaknesses. I don't look back and enjoy the journey probably as much as I need to, because I'm always figuring out what's next. But the Villanova night was just so surreal. A lot of that is just because of how much respect I have for Coach Wright. And there's probably 5 basketball coaches that I've really studied over the years, and that I could say, hey, these guys impacted me stylistically in terms of how we play. And Coach Wright's one of those. I've watched Villanova for years, and how we play off of 2 feet, and how we offensively, the amount that we use the 3 ball and the spacing concepts, the respect I have for him, and to be able to go up there and, not just compete against him, to be able to win. That was one that you do. I mean, just being honest, it scares you a little bit. How many more of those do you have like that? Just because that was such a David and Goliath type deal, to be able to go up there and do that. But it was, there's a bunch of those moments that you look back on, you're like, man, this is with all the stress in the business and all the things that we go through as coaches, you really have to protect your mental health, and you got to protect your perspective. Sometimes being able to look back and enjoy some of those moments can be very helpful in that.
Yeah, that's not just a you thing. I think most successful coaches and players I talk to kind of have that same. I don't know if you call it a problem, because that's part of the reason why you're so successful, is goal oriented and make sure you're crossing your T's and dotting your I's. So a couple more before we let you go. I got one more fun one for you. I'm curious. You played at North Greenville. Obviously, you're familiar with the upstate. When you took the job at Furman, did you know what a Paladin was?
I knew what a Paladin was because Furman recruited me. And,
Okay.
I tell people all the time, like, this is funny. Like, I got fired in this office. I got told I wasn't good enough to play here in this office, and I sit in this office every day. Like, I mean, it's funny how life just goes in these weird circles. Furman's where I wanted to go. And, I played at Florence Christian. I was 3A player of the year. We do need to make sure we have an asterisk there. It was Skeeza, which, again, there's a lot of good players that have come out of Skeeza.
Out, man.
But we won the only state championship in Skeeza in Florence Christian history there. And, we had a good little run. And, I had some schools, Liberty and Furman and Charleston Southern, recruit me a little bit. And, man, I wanted to come here so bad. And, so I came to elite camp, and they brought me up for a game, and, this and that. And then they told me, hey, we're not going to take a point guard. And they're probably trying to just nicely tell me I wasn't good enough. But it was, I'd done my research. So when I tell you how you would like to say it's weird and ironic and just completely coincidental that I'm the head coach here, but just looking at the path of my life, it's actually a pretty neat story. Especially when you go through those hard moments like the other night and you lose that game in overtime, and you want to continue to just be as energetic as you can pushing forward. And how cool of a story it's going to be, when we finally get over the hump and win that tournament and get this program back to the NCAA tournament. It's going to be a cool moment. And, to be able to look back and, see just the journey of it. And I've got to do a better job of that at times to be able to reflect on that. But yeah, I knew what it was. I knew it was basically, a knight with a certain type of sword. And, we've got the statue out front, right there in front of the football complex. But yeah, I was probably one of the few that knew that.
Because it's one of the more intimidating mascots. I think the word Paladin isn't thrown around enough. Look at the Oregon Ducks. You'd rather be a Paladin than a Duck. You know what I mean?
Right.
All right.
Right. It's a little different. Before
I let you go, and I do appreciate you taking the amount of time that you have here with us, I've asked a few other guests this, but I think your journey maybe gives a little bit of insight that could be beneficial to those listening or watching, however you get your podcasts. The college basketball coaching profession as a whole is so brutal to get into. It's so competitive. And there are so many more stories of guys that, have cups of coffee and then end up doing something else. You've had your own speed bumps in your road. For those that are possibly, I wish I could do that. I wish I could go, be a college basketball coach, maybe not at a D1 level like Furman or, wherever they end up going. But for those that are interested in the profession, I'm not sure it gets talked about the rungs of the ladder that you have to climb, the amount of pressure that you face on a day-to-day basis and all the things that go with it, and really how easy it might be to get disenchanted with the entire process if you don't have that tough mindset to go through it. So for those watching or listening, if Coach Richey would share a few words of wisdom on the steps that you've gone through and the advice you give to somebody looking to walk that same path.
Well, I mean, that's a great question, and one that's, I could go on at length about. I'll say this: I'm biased. I do think it's the greatest job in the world. I think that, we get to still compete. We get to be around a sport. We get to see guys develop and grow. Here's the number one thing I would tell anybody that's looking to do this. It is difficult. Okay, it's a lot harder than people think, and the hardest part about this job probably is the fact that anybody thinks they can do this job. And so if you're a finance person, you're not going to have a bunch of people coming over there and telling you how to invest in the stock market, because a lot of people don't know. But in my job, there's a ton of people that say, hey, we could do that. Right. And so it looks easier than it is. And so sometimes that entices people that, hey man, that looks like a fun job, right? Like there's a lot of fun in that. You can be around the game, and, eventually you can be on TV, and, that looks cool. If you do it for those reasons, you won't last. You have, if you want to do this, if you want to be in college athletics and you want it not to eat you alive, you've got to make sure your motive is strictly for the growth of the individuals that you get to influence on a daily basis. And if you have a passion for that, if you have a passion for seeing somebody going, from good to great, or going from what their potential is to actually arriving there and being a part of that journey, that's really what blocks out all the noise. Because at the end of the day that as well as we're going to do as a program, it's going to be the byproduct of the processes and the people that we have in place here and our ability to influence and impact. And you've got to make sure that's the number one driver. And I've seen a lot of people get in it because they're like, man, we get to put a suit on the sideline. We get to be on TV. We get to be a part of college basketball. And that's just such a small piece of it, right? You've got to be willing to say, hey, I want to have an impact on people. Also, the start of this business is tough. And I think the reason that is because there's entry-level barriers because of how many people want to do it. That there's kind of like a natural, there's a natural weed out that, people are willing to do this stuff for free. I mean, there's staffs all over the country that have volunteers on them and, guys making very little money because basically what they're trying to see is, do they really want to do this? And so there's going to be some sacrificial elements. There's going to be some entry-level barriers at the front of it that you have to get through. And then if your motives are right, you're doing it for the right reasons, and you're willing to sacrifice and put in the work, then yeah, the job definitely gets more fun, if that makes sense. The job definitely gets more rewarding. The job definitely gets, I would say, more creative, when you get to start making some decisions as opposed to just taking different orders. But, it's, for us, I mean, it's incredible, for my kids and my family. I mean, Mike Bothwell's in my house Monday night eating dinner with us. I mean, that's just comes over, wants to see the kids, wants to, I'm with Noah yesterday morning at breakfast, and, Rhett Lister, one of our walk-ons who I played for his dad, he and I are having lunch the other day before he goes and plays golf, like that's what I love, like I love being here for these guys. I love stretching them. I love trying to see them like, hey, you're this, I'm telling you, we can get you here. It's not always going to be easy, but this is where you can be. And then the conversation when the kid says, Coach, your belief and your push is what got me there. I didn't even think I was going to be able to get there myself. Matt Rafferty, to see him, he's a GA at Indiana right now, to see him in the business, and Daniel Fowler, who's on my staff, who played for us. That stuff is more rewarding to me than any win that I've gotten, and to see what they're doing and what they want to do, the impact that we've been able to have. And listen, you hear a lot of coaches say this, and there's a little coach speak to it. And it's why our business has a few black eyes in it, because there's not always the sincerity in what I'm telling you. There's not always it's what we're supposed to say, if that makes sense. But when you can get through to actually focusing on doing that, that's where the real joy of this and really the satisfaction of the job comes from. And the trick is, as I wrap this up, I know I'm getting long-winded, but there's an easy piece of you that can get in this for the fun and a little bit of just the ego feel of it, right? And you've got to make sure that it's a completely pure motive, because that's what's going to get you through some of the hard moments.
When you come in with that perspective, you get results like head coach Bob Richey, a school record 23 wins in your first year running the program, back-to-back 25-win seasons in years 2 and 3, a very successful 16-win season this year, and who knows how many that would have been if games didn't get canceled. Coach, I certainly appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate you being so candid with us on so many aspects of your path to the Paladins and all the things you've overcome and certainly persevered into. Obviously this season didn't end the way you wanted it to. It's not where the expectation is that you have created for Furman basketball, but that's a pretty good accomplishment in itself, that the expectation is where it is. Certainly wish you a little bit of sleep this off season. Know you're in my boat with a couple young kids. Hopefully take it easy on you a little bit, and we'll catch back up with you somewhere down the line as we get closer to next college basketball season.
Sounds great, Aaron. Appreciate you having me on, and look forward to catching up soon.
All right. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us here with In-Depth Fox Carolina Sports. Obviously, basketball season winding down, but many more sports to talk about as we move forward. Another great episode coming up for you next week. Have a great one.